Good evening. Today we'll be looking at Chapter 15 entitled Black Does Not Equal Poor, Understanding the Influence of Class on Black Students' Educational Outcomes. The researcher and author Marjorie L. Doring Williams examines the intersecting identities of race and class and the effects on Black college student experiences and educational outcomes. The two categories have become interchangeable. A few reasons why there is more research available for low-income Black students is because of the number of Black families and students that are considered low-income, in which they are far greater in number than the middle class. In 2011, 28% of Black individuals were below the poverty line, in comparison to only 10% of the white individuals, thus resulting in Black becoming synonymous with low income. The research question that the researcher examines is, does class status influence the relationship between race and educational experiences? This study examines literature review from two different articles. Fegan 2011 looked at how Blacks respond to discrimination. Fegan 2011 defined discrimination as actions or practices carried out by members of dominant racial or ethnic groups that have a differential and negative impact on members of subordinate racial and ethnic groups. Fegan examined several responses observed among the Black middle class as a result of discriminatory experiences that were encountered. These responses included withdrawal, resigned acceptance, verbal responses, and physical counterattacks. Many individuals have access to middle class resources that help the middle class protect themselves from more overt forms of discrimination. However, having access and being in middle class status is recognized does not entirely eliminate discrimination against Blacks. The second article, Fan-Smith et al. 2010, examined significant differences in racial identity attitudes amongst gender and community type, but not among the socioeconomic status. Fan-Smith et al. 2010 found that Black students that were around predominantly white people growing up reported more of an isolated feeling towards other Black students and felt discomfort around their white peers. All of these actions can lead to low persistence and retention rates for these Black students, according to the authors. The researcher Marjorie L. Doring Williams speaks from a place of experience. She was the child of a Haitian immigrant who acquired graduate degrees in pharmacy. The purpose of her research is from a place of reference. Her experience was very different than what she had expected or envisioned. She found it difficult to adjust to a social atmosphere that was predominantly white, and the institution was overly hostile to minority students, Black students in particular. Her identity was in Black first-generation immigrant, middle class, and a college student. She felt as if there were no targeted resources for the intersections of being upper middle class, Black, and a college at the institution she was attending. Because she did not fit in the low-income category, she could not participate in some of the college outreach and academic support programs, such as the summer bridge programs that were designed to improve retention. This chapter looks at two different theoretical frameworks. The first, Cross's Nigrescence theory expanded. This theory only refers to race and is associated with the foundation of Black identity development. This framework is grouped into three different categories: the pre-encounter, immersion, and emersion, and the internalization. The pre-encounter racial identity describes the pro-American attitudes of Black and negative stereotypes, the miseducated about Black people collectively, and self-loathing about self-race. Immersion and emersion racial identity includes anti-white or pro-Black attitudes. On one end of the spectrum, there is a strong disdain for white people, while on the opposite end, there is a quote-unquote uncritical romanticization of anything related to black people and culture. The internalization racial identity includes the acceptance of black culture through being Afrocentric, bicultural, multiculturalist, racial, and multicultural inclusive. These attitudes are positive and takes an accepting stance. Unlike the Cross's Nigrescence theory expanded, Abe's, Jones, and McEwen's model of multiple dimensions of identity takes race, gender, and sexual orientation into consideration as it looks at how an individual's ongoing outside influences help shape identity. The multiple dimension identity also promotes the notion that identity and development is an ongoing process that is influenced by one's experiences and context. The method of this research, the data was pulled from the U.S. Department of Education's National Center on Educational Statistics in 2002. It examined students in the 10th grade through post-secondary education and into the workforce. Follow-ups were examined in 2004 in the students' 12th grade year, then again in 2006 in their sophomore year of college, and finally in 2012. The sample size of this research included 1,402 participants that were full-time black students who attended both public and private four-year institutions. 50.6% made up of male and 49.4% made up of female students. The results prove that race and class actually do cross paths and intersect. However, because of the intersection of race and class, current research does not represent educational outcomes. The researcher proposes that more research on middle-class black students need to be done. Most research now examines low-income black students that encounter barriers such as low resources and attribute that to their academic performance in post-secondary education. It does not focus on the intersecting components of race and class and how these components impact student experiences and outcomes. The researcher also points out that previous research series can link the lack of resources to low-income black students, and also previous research and other theoretical frameworks have not addressed the relationship of middle-class black students who had access to resources and the struggles that they encounter. Most studies, more studies need to examine and dissect the differences between black students, and not just black students and their peers, but the intersecting identities that need to be recognized amongst the black students. How this is useful to practitioners. Understanding the fundamental basics that black students are not a homogeneous group of students is very important. There are other factors that shape an individual's experiences. This can help policymakers and higher education officials become more aware of the multiple identities of black students to help align effective programs and support programs for this population of students. Many decisions about funding, programming, and efforts to improve educational outcomes for college students are made on a macro level. This study finally concludes that there is a lack of targeted support for black middle-class students. Middle-class and upper-class black students tend to be overlooked when policymakers are making decisions. The author hopes that this analysis will shed light on diversity amongst black students in higher education and argues that diversity must be met with equally diverse forms of support.